Two surprising developments in the sports world last night. You had David Price pitching lights out in a playoff game, and if you look at Price's postseason history with an ERA just north of 5, the dominant starts have been few and far between, but last night was the outlier. Price was just terrific. 6 shutout innings, just 3 hits and 9 strikeouts to punch the Boston Red Sox ticket to the World Series once again, as Boston knocks out the defending World Series champions in the Houston Astros. The Red Sox now await the winner of the Brewers and Dodgers in the NLCS. Game 6 and that series picks back up tonight. And in the city of brotherly love at the Wells Fargo Center, Markelle Fultz, the number 1 pick in the 2017 NBA draft, makes his first career three-pointer. A pretty odd storyline to be made nationally, given that Fultz was selected as the best player in 2017, but Fultz's career in a year plus has gotten off to a rocky, odd, mysterious, and dumbfounding start so far. And let me preface this by saying that I am really rooting for the kid. I understand that Fultz and his development is just crucial to the success of the Philadelphia 76ers. I've been watching Sixers games since the mid-90s, when Allen Iverson was selected number 1 overall in 1996 out of Georgetown, and I understand how critical it is for Fultz to become the player that the Sixers envisioned coming out of the University of Washington. And I've probably been borderline obsessive with watching the amount of tape that I've watched of Markelle Fultz. It's probably going on hours right now, going back to his high school days at DeMatha, to his college days at the University of Washington. And look, I understand that Fultz's team was not great, and he didn't play in an elite conference in the Pac-12. The Huskies won only 9 games in Fultz's lone season out west, but there was no doubt about it that Fultz was the consensus number 1 player in the draft that year, ahead of Lonzo Ball, who was selected number 2 by the Lakers. And yes, ahead of Jason Tatum, who was selected number 3 by the Boston Celtics. A variety of factors go into why Fultz's team wasn't all that great. Lorenzo Romar wasn't a great coach that year, and Fultz's surrounding cast wasn't all that good as well. But you look at Fultz's ability to be a dynamic playmaker, and you look at his highlights from what he was able to do at Washington. This is a guy who could score from all 3 levels. You put the rock in his hands, and he was able to get to the rack at ease and displaying an array of moves to get to the cup in the process. He also had an elite mid-range game as well. And from beyond the arc, he had no hesitancy shooting from distance, and he did it pretty well, shooting above 40%. And this is a guy, again, who scored at all 3 levels and did so in a way that really translated to the NBA game. I mentioned that size, that speed, that length, that athleticism. That's what you need at the guard position in this day and age in the NBA. And that's why the Sixers moved up in the draft to select Markelle Fultz. And it's not like his career in the NBA professionally has been a disaster right from the get-go. I want you all to do yourselves a favor and just go in the YouTube archives and search Markelle Fultz Summer League highlights. He got his career start professionally in the Utah Summer League and played briefly in Las Vegas before suffering a turned ankle, which eliminated the rest of his rookie Summer League season just a couple of seasons ago. And his game translated in the Summer League. He was getting to the hoop. He was hitting pull-up mid-range jumpers. He was displaying spin moves. He was hitting step-back three-pointers, coming off of screens, hitting pull-up three-point shots off the dribble, even catching the attention of Kevin Durant, who also hails from the D.C. area, where Fultz also hails from, as he went to DeMatha with the Hezi pull-up Jimbo. Fultz displayed the entire skill set that made him the best player coming out of college basketball that year and made the Philadelphia 76ers look intelligent with selecting him number 1 overall. But I think this odd start to the career might all go back to that turned ankle. If you remember the highlight, he tried to get back on defense for a chase down block, which he's very, very good at. Another reason why the Sixers selected him number 1 overall, because he's got defensive upside with his ability to play defense and guard multiple positions. And As he was going to attempt the chase down block, he turned his ankle, and that ended Fultz' summer league career, okay? And we didn't see him again until the Sixers played in an open team scrimmage at the Palestra. And some rumors started to circulate that Fultz' shot looked really weird. That summer, he started working with his high school trainer. I believe his name is Keith Williams, and there were some rumors and developments coming out that Fultz was starting to change his shot a little bit, and from there, it wound up being a disaster. Somehow, this hitch in his shot developed, and Fultz's willingness, his bravery to shoot from the outside and really anywhere, to really not have any filter offensively, to generate as a playmaker, suddenly disappeared. And all of a sudden, Fultz was spooked from 15 feet and out. Started the season last year as a rookie and just did not look right. Was given open space from the perimeter and was not willing to take any outside shots. So the Sixers sat him until the end of the year, when he made 14 appearances in the regular season, brief appearances against Miami in the playoffs as the Sixers advanced to the second round against the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And after that, Fultz did not play at all. And the Sixers blame this as being a shoulder injury. Fultz and his camp came out and said that it was a shoulder injury. I think it might be something more. I think it's something in between the ears. I think it's something mentally, because we heard this offseason that Fultz worked with prolific trainer Drew Hanlon, who is one of the best shooting coaches in all of the world. He took, 100,000, 150,000 shots. We saw video of Fultz having an improved form to his jump shot over the summer, and he sat down, did a Players Tribune piece with Isaiah Thomas, and he came out and said, look, this was a shoulder injury. This was not anything mental. I was seriously hurt, and that's what attributed to the hitch in my shot, the unwillingness to shoot from the outside, me being scared to be the playmaker that made me the number one pick in the NBA draft coming out of Washington. And I think it's just got to be something mentally. It's got to be something between the ears, because in the preseason, we saw Fultz hit a shot from the corner in the preseason. The crowd went nuts at the Wells Fargo Center, but it still looked odd. There was still some type of hitch in his jump shot. And for the rest of the preseason, again, he just looked scared to shoot the ball from the outside, and that is now translated into the regular season. Look, you can look at the stat line last night against the Chicago Bulls, 5 of 15 from the floor, and if you want to take a positive from it, it's the fact that Fultz was actually willing and able to take outside shots, but he just doesn't look right. This is a kid who looks like he is lost, a kid who looks like the game is just moving too fast for him, and a player who just seems overwhelmed by the NBA game right now. And I'm not knocking the kid's work ethic. A couple of nights ago, after the opening night loss against the Boston Celtics, Fultz was in the gym at 2 a.m. with Ben Simmons shooting outside jumpers. And he was one of the first players to arrive at the Wells Fargo Center for the Sixers season opener last night. But for some reason, every time Fultz attempts a jump shot, the form looks different. Sometimes there's a hitch. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes his release point differentiates from the release point that you saw from the last jumper that he took. And that's why I think that this thing is mental. The Bulls and the Celtics in the first two games gave Fultz area codes of space to shoot from the outside, and Fultz just did not pull the trigger. The hesitancy is something that you have to be concerned about. And I understand that he's only 20 years old and he's still developing. And he's been a slow developing player historically in his career, but something just doesn't seem right. What happened to the player that we saw from Washington, the player that we saw briefly in the Summer League, a guy who would pull the trigger from anywhere, who would just let it fly with no second doubts at all? to the player that you see now, who just seems to be lost. Brett Brown has come out and he's starting Fultz. As Fultz has started the first 2 games so far this year, that is doing him a favor because the Sixers are a top 10 team in the league right now. J.J. Redick is a proven veteran at 34 years old, a guy who averaged over 17 points per game last year, the highest points per game average that Redick has averaged in his entire career. He deserves to be starting on this team, but Brett Brown understands how critical Fultz is to the future success of the team. He needs to build the confidence of his former number 1 overall pick, but Fultz is trying to carve out his niche right now. And if you watch Fultz play outside from Ben Simmons, you don't see a guy who has a cold-blooded mentality, doesn't have that cutthroat mental makeup that makes some of these players so great, the mental makeup that has made Jason Tatum an elite player so far, in a season change so far in Boston, and a guy who just doesn't seem to really want it. Defensively and offensively. I'm not seeing him put forward an effort. And I understand his demeanor is a little bit more laid back, but I don't see a player that has displayed a mentality or a mental makeup that makes him worthy of the number 1 pick. And player health mentally and mental health in general across the world is a very, very serious problem. And if Fultz has just altogether lost his confidence, and there's something going on in between the ears where he's erratic and his brain isn't functioning as it should, then I honestly really do feel bad for the kid. Because he displayed everything that translated into him being a superstar in this league. And all of a sudden, kapoof, it's gone. And it almost reminds me of Space Jam, my favorite movie growing up, when the Monstars just zapped the talents of Patrick Ewing and Charles Barkley. But the thing is, that was a movie. We're seeing this happen in real life. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, and nobody can seem to get down to the nitty-gritty point of what exactly happened from after that ankle injury in Summer League to what has happened and transpired from then until now. Because Fultz looks like a shell of himself. I was happy to see him at least attempt shots last night. That is the start of gaining confidence and the start of him trying to become the player that he used to be. But it just doesn't look right. There's a hitch. There is a delay. There is a second guessing in his own mind right now, and you're seeing it play out on the floor right now in real time. If the shoulder injury was that serious, okay, the scapular imbalance that the Sixers had labeled it as and Fultz's camp labeled it as, maybe there was some type of shoulder injury. But if it was that serious of an injury, why did Fultz come back last year and play 14 games? You have to question whether or not the Sixers, who have made questionable decisions in the past, made the right decision in bringing Fultz back last year. Even a year ago, in the 14 games that he appeared in the regular season. What was he, the youngest player to record a triple-double? You saw some of the flashes of what the Sixers saw coming out of Washington. But if the shoulder injury was that serious, or if mentally Fultz was not right, he should have never come back last year. And if the injury still exists, why is Fultz playing this year? Shouldn't be on the floor. That's what leads me to believe that it's something more. It's something mental. Something is going on in his thought process, in his brain, inside his head. And would it be easier for Fultz to just come out if that is the case? That he might be dealing with some anxiety, that he's dealing with the yips. Is it easier for him to just come out and say it so that people stop questioning what has happened. Because the Sixers look like fools right now. Not only did they draft Fultz #1 overall, but they moved up in the draft to do so. And the player that the Celtics picked with the Sixers' original pick, Jason Tatum, looks like an absolute star. And the gap between the Sixers and the Celtics right now is monumental after what you saw opening night and after what you saw in the Eastern Conference semifinals last year. The Celtics are stacked in large part because of the development of Jason Tatum. The Sixers are not at that point. 1-5 against the Celtics in their last 6 games. And it makes you think what the Sixers would look like if they put out a starting 5 that consisted of Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, and Joel Embiid. Instead, there's this storyline and situation playing out with Fultz that nobody can seem to pinpoint or identify what the hell is going on. And again, if it's something mentally, you really have to feel for the kid. And I don't think the Sixers have taken a great approach in helping Fultz out. Maybe they shouldn't have played him last year. Maybe they should have handled everything differently, not putting Fultz out in front of the media, where he was clearly laboring physically and mentally in front of the spotlight, where all of the reporters, and I'm not knocking the reporters because it's their job to report what's going on with the #1 pick, but they put Fultz out there in the practice gym, and everybody has their cell phone out taking video of Fultz just looking awful. Or Fultz working out at the Wells Fargo Center or at different arenas around the NBA with this hitch in his jump shot. Missing jumpers routinely. And people are putting this on social media, and Fultz is just getting ridiculed. That is not helping his confidence at all. Another thing, go to the NBA arenas, okay? An hour before the game, and you will see these guys just drain shot after shot after shot, making it look just so easy. It's that repetitive motion that makes some of these guys so great, where they are just doing what they do and sinking shot after shot after shot in warm-ups. Because that's what it takes to be in the NBA. Even guys who are the 12th men on a bench, you still see them swishing shots routinely like it's nothing. Fultz, you watch him in warm-ups, he's missing these jumpers, and he's not even being guarded. Which leads you to believe again that this all has to come down to the mental fortitude, the mental instability that's happening with Fultz right now. And I honestly, truly do feel for him if that is in fact the case. This is a business. This is professional sports. Jobs are on the line when you miss out on decisions like this. And if the Sixers missed out on this pick, and Jason Tatum is a perennial all-star and borderline or a Hall of Famer, and that's the difference between the process working and the process not working, it all goes back to the Markelle Fultz pick. Because what this team needs right now, aside from Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, who in my eyes are MVP candidates so far this year, is a guy who can create off the dribble. Somebody who can score at all 3 levels. Around the hoop, mid-range, and from 3. A guy to just take pressure off of Ben Simmons and Embiid. A guy to space out the floor a little bit. A different wrinkle, a different element in the offense. Fultz's game at Washington was the filler for what was missing in the recipe for the Sixers to make a deep run into the playoffs. That's the skill set that they need. That's the reason I think that the Sixers were star hunting this offseason and struck out doing so. Because they understand, the players, the organization, Brett Brown, the head coach, that they need a guy like that. a Kawhi Leonard type, a Kevin Durant type, a Markelle Fultz type, the guy that you saw at Washington and in Summer League, a Bradley Beal even, a CJ McCollum. And the string is short. Brett Brown is dedicated to starting Fultz. But if this continues all throughout the year, you got to cut your losses and move on, because the window to win in professional sports is a short one. You have Embiid and you have Simmons. These guys are unbelievable young playmakers, but you have to strike while the iron is hot, because if you wait too long, it's going to be too late. The organization waited too long to surround Allen Iverson with talent in the late 90s and early 2000s. And aside from making it to the finals in 2001 and getting blown away in the NBA Finals by the Los Angeles Lakers, who was the best player ever to play with Allen Iverson? I understand he was hard to play with, but they didn't surround him with talent, drafting and through free agency. Allen Iverson should have had a more successful career. That's got to serve as proof that you have to get after it. You can't take this stuff lightly. You can't just sit back on your rocker and just wait for a guy to come. You got to go out and attack it and surround these guys with playmakers. Charles Barkley dealt with the same thing. He wasn't surrounded with any types of talent. He said so himself. So if Fultz isn't that guy, Sixers have to move on after this year. And Brett Brown has to do Fultz favors with not only starting him, which I think could help his confidence a little bit, but the minutes have to be consistent. You either go in with this plan or you don't. Okay, 21 minutes in the first half against Boston opening night, 4 minutes in the second half. How does that help Fultz's confidence? He was unplayable in crunch time when the game was in a tense moment. You've got to find out what you got with this kid. Night 2, a different story. The game's out of reach. You play Fultz, I think 30-plus minutes, and the minutes were distributed evenly throughout the first and second half. And when Fultz finally started to get it going, the game was out of reach. Can he do it when the pressure is on? That's the question that I have. Again, if it's something mental, you got to feel for the kid. But at the same time, this is a business. You got to perform, and if you don't, businesses move on. If employees don't perform in corporate America, they get canned. Okay? If athletes don't perform up to expectations in professional sports, they get demoted. We'll see what happens with Markelle Fultz, but through 2 games, I see a guy who just seems to be lost, is trying to find his role. And I understand he's playing out of position a little bit as a shooting guard. Not something he's done traditionally because he's been a point guard. It takes a little while to adjust to not having the ball in your hand. But the hesitancy to shoot the ball when the Bulls and Celtics are giving him 10 feet of space to do so, it's odd. It's one of the most mysterious starts to a career for any NBA pick, because he's not like previous players who have just dogged it, who got their paycheck and mailed it in, who said, you know what, I got my dough, I got my bread, I'm done. Fultz puts in the work. He puts in the work, but it's something up here, it seems like, right now, that's just not right. Hopefully last night, with 19,000 people cheering him on, showing support of Fultz, can do a lot for his confidence moving forward. He was thankful for it, and I'm sure Sixers fans were thankful that he actually attempted to shoot from the outside. That's what he needs to do. Shooters shoot, playmakers make plays, and ballers ball. Fultz has to figure this out on his own. And if that means jacking up shots to get that confidence back, it's going to be a tough watch for Sixers fans. But they have to understand that Fultz is a key cog in what the Sixers turn out to be as an organization moving forward. It's a very intelligent fan base. They understand the importance of Fultz developing. That's why they were cheering for him last night, encouraging him to shoot. They weren't taunting him. For as much flack and grief as Sixers fans get around the country, they're very intelligent sports fans. They understand that for the Sixers to reach peak levels of success, Fultz has to turn into that player that he was at Washington. The player that the Sixers saw at the collegiate ranks. The player that they selected #1 overall. And they showed their support for him last night, encouraging him to get out of these shooting woes and just shoot it. Going to be interesting to see what happens with Markelle Fultz. I wish the best for the man. Only 20 years old. Takes time to develop. And I hope he's able to do so. Because when he's right, he's really, really special.